Welcome back to the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. I am Alan Seslowsky here with Cody Carpentier from PlayerProfile.com. What's up, Cody?
What's up, my man? This is was on here a couple months ago. This is fun to get on here and chop it up with you, man. How you doing?
Yeah, good. Cody's one of my personal favorite guests because the work he's doing over at Player Profiler, it really does translate to figuring out who's going to break out in fantasy football, and that's what Cody's here to talk about today. We're going to talk about 5 rookies that, based on his analytics, his profiles that he's developed as director of content over at Rotounderworld and Player Profiler, who has a good chance to break out. But before we even get into that, Cody, news of the day strikes. Sony Michel is headed to the Rams. Give me the whole fallout to take for fantasy football this year.
I mean, right when Cam Akers went down, everybody looked at Darrell Henderson. Darrell Henderson's got to be jumped up into the 4th round, the 5th round. He didn't quite make up that far in ADP. And then people were like, maybe Xavier Jones is that guy. Maybe Jake Funk can do something. Nah, they didn't really, McVay didn't really lean towards them. He really hasn't pushed like all in on Darrell Henderson. And then Darrell Henderson has the hand injury this last week. And I think that might have been the last straw where like McVay is like, all right, we got to go get somebody. And honestly, my first instinct was maybe they go after a free agent. Maybe they actually try and bring Gurley back. Like maybe he's got half of a leg left or something. But the Michel news broke today. I think that's pretty big. Why? Because the running back coach in LA is a Georgia alum. I believe his name's Thomas Brown. And as you know, Sony Michel went to Georgia. This is a guy that he's going to get his guy. So I would say it's going to be a running back by committee, but it's probably going to be both Darrell and Sony as the lead guys. That's I'm probably not going to be drafting either one, though, to be honest.
Yeah, it was kind of obvious in a sense that they were going to that the Rams were going to find somebody. I thought maybe it was when those cuts started happening. You've heard names like Sony Michel's not a shocker name to go over there. We've heard that name. We've heard Royce Freeman, a couple other guys. And if you have already rostered Darrell Henderson, I think this is kind of the perfect situation in a sense. And now I'm not talking about if you have to draft him coming up. Sony Michel, he's going to be part of the game plan, but this is not somebody that's going to take over the backfield, right?
No, he's not going to come in and take like 300 touches like you wanted out of Cam Akers. He's definitely not going to be that guy. But I think what this might do is this might say a little bit more of what the Patriots think of guys they have in-house, like J.J. Taylor, Ramondre Stevenson. I think this might say more about what New England thinks what they have than it is what maybe the Rams are just looking for that depth piece to really add into their running back by committee kind of angle if they're going to take on the season. And I mean, they blew up a 1st-round pick in New England on Sony Michel, but at least they recuperated a little bit from him, I guess. I think what I read was 5th and 6th round compensatory that could turn into a 4th. So not terrible, honestly, value on a guy that pretty much busted in New England.
Yeah, and if you're watching on the live feed, I see people jumping in the chat. Feel free to let us know what you think of where Darrell Henderson should go. For those of you listening on the audio podcast, we're about to talk about the top 5 breakout rookies in a few minutes, but I just want to cover one other news item of the day. Travis Etienne fallout. I mean, if you listen to any podcast, everyone's going to have a take on this. Obviously, it's a terrible thing, but what's your immediate reaction on James Robinson for redraft purposes? Where do you think that he should kind of fall in right now?
For James Robinson, like me personally, what was he? He finished at RB, I believe, 7 or 10 last year, I believe it was. But for me, I think he vaults himself straight into the Chris Carson tier. Chris Carson, J.K. Dobbins. He finished his RB 7 last year, 1,000 yards on the ground, 345 in the air, 50 receptions, 10 total touchdowns. How is he not? He's 17.7 fantasy points per game last year. That was 5th. I really like James Robinson. I don't love him. I never did love him. But now with the Etienne injury, what is it? Carlos Hyde? Is Carlos Hyde really going to take away 150 touches? We know Urban Meyer loves him, but I think this vaults James Robinson right into the 4th round without question.
Yeah, I think that we're even going to see as the running back thirst starts to get greater and greater. I think there's a chance that you're going to see him on the 2-3 turn. And the reason I'm saying that is that I look back at some of the best ball drafts, and I know running back thirst is even a little heavier in best ball, but I look back to some of the drafts I did earlier in February, March, and April, and James Robinson was squarely in the 2nd round. So if there's some anchoring to his old ADP in the 7th round, maybe the 3rd round. So it'll be somewhere in between there. Obviously, as more camp reports come out, round, and we all know what happens if he breaks a run in the preseason finale or something else. So, all right, Cody, let's talk a little. We're going to come back and talk about a little bit more current events, but first, your superpower, which I admire, and that's why I love having you on the podcast, is that you have this rookie analysis, young player analysis. The algorithm that you, the inputs that you make over on playerprofile.com really helps point to breakout players. So let's start with your top 5 rookies based on the analytics that you're observing, that you're analyzing, and profiles. Who is most likely to produce for us this season? We're in the heart of redraft season. Who's your first rookie, and what's the reason why?
I got to give a lot of shout out help to Josh. Josh does a lot of work on the back end.
Josh Larkey, you're talking about.
Josh Larkey does a lot of the analytic work on the back end that helps this stuff work. But some of the guys that were pushed right to us, especially through the Breakout Finder, was Rondale Moore. Rondale Moore coming in the second round. You all know how fast he is. He's a small guy though, 5'7", 181. He goes in the middle of the second round. He's currently going off the board at 109 on his ADP. His freshman season at Purdue, he had 1,258 yards receiving on 148 targets. If that doesn't translate to the NFL, I don't know what will. His Breakout Finder rating was 46.9. That's top 4 in the class, 47 dynamic score, 53.6 level of competition. Very high-end numbers here. And like I said, 96 percentile burst, 96 percentile 40-yard dash, 94th percentile agility. And in that Arizona offense where you have your ex, DeAndre Hopkins, they bring in A.J. Green, a guy that can literally play in a hybrid tight end role. He can play out wide as an X. He can play all over. You're going to be able to have Christian Kirk run down the field, DeAndre Hopkins work across the middle, and Rondale Moore is literally going to eat up everything, kind of like you see like with Laviska Shenault, Deebo Samuel, guys around the line of scrimmage that can just be yak monsters. And I think that's going to translate very well, especially in this Arizona offense.
Yeah, and you saw it in the preseason too. I mean, I know those weren't like dynamic, crazy plays, but just the usage alone, you're like, oh, this is everything we thought. Because so many times we get excited about the rookies, and then, nothing happens. You're like, oh yeah, they're a rookie. But you could see it. You could see the jet sweeps possibly coming, the short passing game. So, this is what I like to after each rookie, I want you to talk about where you would draft them. So if you're in a draft, like so many people that are watching this video today and listening to this podcast, and where would you draft Rondale Moore? Is he an 8th round pick, a 12th round pick? Like if you want to get him proactively, where do you have to draft him?
Yeah, so right now in Underdog, he's going at the turn to start the 10th round. He's wide receiver 53 off the board. And in the last week, he's jumped up 10 spots. So he's jumped up a full round. So you're going to be looking in that 10, 11 round spot. In a redraft, especially in leagues with maybe your home leagues, you're going to be able to get him in the 12th to 13th. But in a more competitive league, you're going to want to be looking in the 10th round, maybe the 9th. It really depending on your build and how you're going at it. But I like Rondale Moore. It might take him a couple weeks. It takes a lot of these rookies a couple weeks to really get into it. But I think he translates very well to the NFL, where he's a guy that doesn't need to exactly win downfield. He can win near the line of scrimmage, and that's going to benefit him in the long run and in the short term.
And who's his best comparable player over at Player Profile where you guys who do you have for him?
T.Y. Hilton. T.Y. Hilton is his best comparable player. That's completely speed, size, draft capital driven. He is, very, very close comparable, but he also has traits to play near the line of scrimmage, whereas T.Y. Hilton's more downfield threat, which Rondale, that's what I'm saying. That's why I love Rondale, because he can literally do both. That's the benefit that he brings.
Even though he's short in stature, he's built pretty well, and he's diverse. His game is diverse. Okay, who's your number 4? We're counting down 5 rookies. These aren't necessarily in order, but these are Cody's 5 most likely players to break out that from this rookie class. Who's player number 4?
We'll stay with the same last name, Elijah Moore, 5'9", 178, another second-round pick. These Moore brothers, they've been talked about heavily going into the draft. Elijah Moore got propped up. There was even some talk about being a first-round pick. He ended up going 202 in the NFL draft, whereas like the more analytics, people liked Rondale a little bit more. But, deep threat. I saw that. Rondale will be a deep threat as well. Yeah, 100%. But, Elijah Moore, he comes into this offense, and I talk about this a lot on Twitter. Having that dog mentality, Elijah Moore has the dog mentality. When you see him getting touted by A.J. Brown, DK Metcalf, all these guys from Ole Miss that he played with, his level of competition, 49.1, ranks very well in the Breakout Finder. Reason being, he played with DK, A.J. Brown, Dawson Knox, all these guys. There's even a couple guys that he played with that made to the pros, but they're not dudes like DeMarcus Lodge, Trey Nixon, guys like that. 21.3 years old, 92nd percentile 40-yard dash, 98th percentile agility, best comparable to Tyler Lockett. And you've already seen it. You've seen a lot of the buzz early during camp of Elijah Moore. He had a quad injury this last week, but Elijah Moore's a guy that can come in day one, steal that job from Jamison Crowder, steal the job from Keelan Cole. These guys are, Crowder's a very underrated receiver, but Elijah Moore is the next level of a Jamison Crowder. And to where you can draft him at, you're going to be in the later part of the draft. Oops, sorry, I just lost my.
Yeah, it's okay. But, I was going to say about Elijah Moore, too. And I think I heard Sigmund Bloom talk about this over at Football Guys. He was saying that the beat writer, Connor Hughes is the Jets beat writer? I forget his exact name. But he said that every time he tries to focus and concentrate on somebody else at Jets practice, he can't help himself but watch Elijah Moore. I mean, you're not going to take a lot from beat writer quotes. We take them with a grain of salt. Yeah. We put them through our own filter. But that one is like, we always talk about the eye test. It's not a metric. It's counter to what you talk about over at Player Profiler. But, the eye test does mean something. You watch football. We watch a lot of football, and you want to see that early round pick pop off the screen. And Elijah Moore is doing that. And I think that, right now it's funny because he was going ahead of Corey Davis in redraft leagues. And now that gap seems to be switching again with positive buzz and a lot of targets going Corey Davis's way in the preseason. You're seeing Corey Davis's ADP shoot up and Elijah Moore sort of fall back into the double-digit rounds. Of those two players, the veteran Corey Davis or Elijah Moore, which one would you think is a better draft pick for 2021?
I think from the jump, it's going to be Corey Davis. The connection, being in that X role, he's going to be the guy targeted often, and you're going to get more consistency right away. But as the season wanes, I think Elijah Moore is going to take that next step. And I think this benefits him a lot, being that their number one tight end right now, I know we all wanted it to be Chris Herndon, but it's Tyler Kroft. And similar to if you look at the Bengals have Higgins, Chase, Boyd, no tight end, really. It's like Uzoma, right? You go to the Jets, you're looking at Mims, Davis, two big outside guys, and then Moore fitting in kind of like if you want to compare situations to the Tyler Boyd role. And that Tyler Boyd role is beneficial because of the underneath routes, the deep threat, all the things in beneath, because you have the two guys like Denzel Mims and Corey Davis, supreme athletes and supreme talents on the outside. And I think long-term Elijah Moore, you're looking at a back-end season breakout. Early on, he was dealing with a quad injury right now, which you don't love. But I think as the season goes on, Elijah Moore ends up being the guy that's more valuable.
Okay, at this time, we're just going to take a quick break from a word from our sponsors. Okay, we're back. That wasn't for you, YouTube audience. That was for our audio podcast listeners. Okay, we are counting down the top 5 rookies most likely to break out. I'm with Cody Carpentier from Player Profiler. I'm Alan Seslowsky, and this is the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. We've already talked about Rondale Moore, Elijah Moore. Who's your third rookie most likely to break out in 2021?
Let's go to a sophomore because you said rookies and sophomores earlier.
Yep, rookies and sophomores. We're talking about players that have not yet had their second season. So we're going to talk about rookies and players entering their second year. I should have stipulated that.
Yeah, you're good. You're good. And Brian Edwards is my guy. So Brian Edwards ranked very well last year on the Breakout Finder. Came in number 2, 51.5. Level of competition and teammate score well above 90th percentile. And the reason he didn't break out last year, there's a handful of guys, Laviska Shenault, Jalen Rager, and Brian Edwards, that came into the season with nagging injuries, really through the process, Edwards broke his foot, Laviska had a groin injury, Rager had injuries the whole season. Guys that never really had a full, like Justin Jefferson, nobody had camp, but he had time of health to pick up and be that guy, whereas these guys were all nagging injuries, didn't get to practice as much. Brian Edwards is a guy, you already seen it, he's healthy, he's dominating, and last year he only had 11 receptions for 193 yards. Very disappointing, but he's not even 23 years old yet, still comparable to Corey Davis, 6'3", 212, and he's got his coach coming out comparing him to Terrell Owens, like John Gruden. All right, that's a hot take. Come on, man. But come on, man. Like seriously, But no, like he's a dog. He's got the exact same thing I was talking about with Elijah Moore. He has it, and I mean, he's going to go out there and he's going to take control of that number one spot. Like last year, we saw Darren Waller dominate. Like Henry Ruggs didn't do much. Nelson Aguilar was a deep threat. If this offense can take that next step and contribute to Bryan Edwards, like this guy's going to be a beast in the NFL. He had the youngest breakout age of all time on Player Profiler, 17.8. That ranks 100th percentile. His college dominator, 48.4%, 94th percentile. This guy's been dominating since day one that he stepped on the field at South Carolina. And his ADP has jumped immensely over the last month. A month ago, he was going 157th off the board. He's all the way up to 127th off the board. So he jumped 30 spots in the last about 20 days. So
I have a question that I actually would people ask me when I had you on last time, and I think it's a good question, is when you talk about dominator rating, say it in layman's terms. What does that actually mean? What's a dominator rating on Player Profile? What are the secret ingredients? Well, not the secret. What are the main ingredients in something like that?
The main ingredient is how much did they dominate their own team's college share? So like Bryan Edwards, we know he played with Shi Smith. We know he played with Deebo Samuel. How much did he dominate in that situation with who he played with? So you're going to see a lot of guys like a Ruggs, like a Devonta Smith, generally aren't going to have, generally in general terms, right? There's like 8 guys at Alabama at all times. So their college dominators aren't going to be as high. But a guy like Kelvin Johnson at Georgia Tech, who it's him by himself, he's going to be, I believe he's like in the upper 60% college dominator, which is absolutely ridiculous. But it's Georgia Tech. You have to understand their offense and how they run. But this is South Carolina. Bryan Edwards at South Carolina, 48.4%, 94th percentile college dominator. He was literally 50% almost of his team's output on offense. Just think about that in terms of like watching a team play. Like 50% of the time, the yards on offense are going to Bryan Edwards. That's how you got to look at that.
You know, it's they made the joke to me one time. They said, imagine when you played pickup basketball at some point, right? Yeah. Like at the gym or whatever. And say some guy took 50% of the shots. You'd be like, you'd hate that guy, right? You'd be like, oh, this guy. But when you're talking about the amount of, but Bryan Edwards dominated 50% of the work and was successful with it. That's good for our fantasy football team. So, so what would you say is a good benchmark for dominator rating? What percent dominator rating is something that really opens your eyes?
I mean, anything over 30% really catches your eye. The 20% area is kind of like a goal, I guess you'd say. A 25% gets you to the next level, but 30% up really is when you start, sparking your attention. If you want to compare it to some other guys like who I got up in here, Elijah Moore's at 41.9%. He's 85th percentile. I don't believe Rondale Moore was quite that high. Look, but it's 25.6%. So Rondale Moore right at that gap where it's like getting there, but not quite getting there. And that's because his freshman season was so dominant, and then he dealt with some injuries, so it kind of deterred him a little bit. But if he would have been healthy the rest of the way, he definitely would have been in that area. But a guy like Josh Palmer, for example, 40th percentile. He's at Tennessee. He didn't do too much, but he was there. He was in the offense. The offense wasn't great, but he still kind of had some output. So you take notice of small things like that. But if it's at like 10%, you're like, okay, why did this guy not dominate? There's something behind the curtain. Why didn't he dominate at a small school, especially, for example?
Yeah, that's interesting to use, because it's not just the one number. You have to use them in conjunction, and then you start to put together the piece. And that's why we have Cody on today, because he is using all these pieces of data from over at Player Profiler to come over here and tell us who are the top 5 rookies and sophomores, second-year players who haven't played in their second year yet, who are likely to break out based on the metrics that he is looking at. Okay, we've talked about both Moores, Rondale and Elijah Moore. We've talked about Bryan Edwards. We got 2 more rookies to highlight, or sophomores. Who is your second most likely rookie to break out in 2021?
I'm going to go a little under the cover a little bit here. Josh Palmer, rookie, 3rd-round pick out of Los Angeles, actually out of Tennessee, plays for the Los Angeles Chargers. Best comparable to Jacoby Jones, if you remember him from the Baltimore Ravens. His metrics don't jump off the chart at you. He ran a 4.44 in high school. He had a 73rd percentile speed score in high school. He ran a 4.57 coming out at the combine, 58th percentile speed score. Everything else is average, right? 43rd, 51st percentile. Nothing really jumps off. But It's the same thing that goes for all these guys that come out of Michigan. We call it the Harbaugh handicap because everyone goes into Michigan, 5-star, 4-star prospect, and then they kind of put out. And it's really, are they going to make it in the pros? You saw that with Donovan Peoples-Jones last year. Another guy you're going to see come out this year, Nico Collins. But same thing at Tennessee, right? Tennessee's had multiple guys, Marquez Callaway, Cordero Patterson, just guys that go in there and don't really do a lot, and they have to build their way up in the pros. Josh Palmer, 400-plus yards receiving each of the last 3 years on just 46, 50, 65 targets. 15, 13, 23% target shares in that offense. He's been there, and with the dominator, like we talked about a minute ago, 26%, but he's at 6'1", 210. He's a very strong build, not 22 years old yet. And when you actually compare his metrics side by side with Keenan Allen, they're eerily similar.
Yeah, now that Josh Palmer is somebody that in a typical draft, and I agree with you that he is one of the most interesting players, but you probably don't feel comfortable drafting him in a typical 16-round 5-bench league. But if I was to predict, and I'm going to ask you this question later, and I hope it is that who's going to be the hot week 1 or week 2 waiver wire pickup, Josh Palmer has to be a favorite to be one of those wide receivers.
Yeah, it's not so much you're going to draft Josh Palmer. This is more so a guy that you need to pay attention to as far as injuries go, because this offense is going to throw a lot. This offense is going to be explosive with Justin Herbert, Eckler out of the backfield. They're not going to run too much. They're obviously going to run, but right, it's going to be more pass happy. And if you have Keenan Allen taking a lot of the shares, you're going to have a couple tight ends out there. You're going to have Tyron Johnson, Jalen Guyton running deep down the field. But Mike Williams continues to get hurt. Hip flexor injury already popping up. Hip flexors, we know, they linger. And if they linger and he's out, and it's literally Keenan Allen, a couple tight ends, and then you're looking at Tyron Johnson, Josh Palmer's going to get opportunities. And that's just the facts. So if something actually goes down and it's a big injury for Mike Williams, and heaven forbid something happens to Keenan Allen, I don't want anything to happen to Keenan Allen, but Josh Palmer is 6'1", 210. Keenan Allen, 6'2", 210. Both were early third-round picks. They actually were drafted 313 in the 2021 draft was Josh Palmer. Keenan Allen was the 3.14 in 2013, and neither of them are overly athletic. They're just eerily similar athletes or eerily similar prospects. So he's just a guy you need to keep your eye out on. That's the thing. Yeah. And I think he will break out by the end of the season just because of injuries and how explosive this offense is.
It's funny that Mike Williams does get hurt often, but it's almost like no fault of his own. Like he goes up and I mean, you've seen the highlight plays. He goes up and tries to just shove guys out of the way to grab the ball. And then he's got like no regard for his own body. He'll just fall awkwardly and stuff. So it's not that he's one of these guys that just can't stay on the field. It's that he's putting his all out there. So I like that call, Josh Palmer, because I try to identify who those players might be on the week 1, because week 1 and week 2 in the waiver wire in your typical league are the most important. That's where I spend like 70% of my budget. I know that's sometimes people don't think that's optimal, but especially if it's a running back that pops, those are the times to get them. We agree on that. All right.
And I don't think like this offense too, like there's not a lot. It's not like you're looking at CeeDee Lamb, Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup. It's not like there's not that many weapons there. So it wouldn't surprise you if he goes out there, Keenan Allen pulls in 11 targets, Mike Williams gets 4, and then Josh Palmer throws in 8 and 8 targets week 1 as a rookie. You're going to be looking at him, you're like, oh, this guy is going to get usage with everyone on the field. What happens if somebody's not on the field? It's just one of those guys that, especially in deeper leagues, you're going to stash him.
Yeah. All right. So we've counted down 4 rookies or sophomores that are likely to break out according to Cody's analytics. All right. Now, who's the number 1 player on your list? Rookie, or is it a rookie or a sophomore player?
We're going sophomore for the number 1 guy.
All right. So pay attention, because this is someone you're going to need to draft in your typical 16-round draft. So Cody, who is it?
This is a guy that I'm literally going to target. You're targeting him late, but you have reason. It's going to sound a little bit off right away, but you're going to be targeting him late for one reason. If you're a little light on receiver, if you go running back heavy, you get a good tight end, going quarterback, you need some depth at receiver, and you've already seen the injuries coming out of Baltimore have been absolutely ridiculous. Bateman goes down. Watkins goes down. Brown hasn't practiced. Boykin hasn't practiced. The list goes on and on as far as receivers, and there has to be someone to throw to other than Andrews. We know Mark Andrews is going to be there. We know Dobbins is going to be there, but who's the receiver that's getting all of the opportunities, all of the targets with everybody out? It's Devin Duvernay out of Texas. 26.0 on the breakout rating, 60.0 level of competition at Texas. Devin Duvernay is a guy that I had him best comparable to Christian Kirk. Player Profiler has him best comparable to Malcolm Mitchell. He's a mixture of the both. Runs a 4.39, 95th percentile 40-yard dash, 5'11", 200 pounds. He got third-round draft capital, not a seventh round, third-round draft capital. He's turning 24 years old the next couple months. 32% college dominator, which is 60th percentile, 80th percentile college target share. He broke out a little late, and last year only 20 receptions for 200 yards. But there was a lot of guys really to play around with. He was a rookie, and there was no preseason, so there's a lot of things moving around. But what really makes me get pushed into a guy like this, I kind of broke this down a little bit the other day, was there's 138 receivers in the NFL last year that had 20-plus targets on the entire season. And when you break it down by average depth of target, yak targets, that's like a couple of the main things that I like to target in on. And if you break it down by that, there was 11 guys that had an average ADOT of under 8 that finished with more than 3 yards after contact, 3 yards after catch per target. And there was 9 of them finished with over 100 targets, and all of them finished in the top 100. The only one that didn't finish in the top 50 was Deebo Samuel. And one guy that is comparable to all these guys. Sorry, it's kind of jumble to say.
No, it's not jumble because
one
guy
that's
I was just going to say that the player that Devin Duvernay reminds me of from a usage perspective is Deebo Samuel.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at. So
yeah,
and the list I'm going to read off to you really quickly. All these guys finished in the top 100. Deebo Samuel, like I said, he didn't get all the snaps last year because he was injured, but 10 of these 11 guys finished in the top 50 in PPR scoring last year. And they're all, when I read this list off to you, you're going to know each one of these guys as being an undervalued guy right now. Keenan Allen, Robert Woods, Juju, Deontay Johnson, Curtis Samuel, Cooper Kupp, Cole Beasley, Jarvis Landry, Crowder, Laviska Shenault, Deebo Samuel, all guys that are continue to finish top 50. Most of these guys are in the top 30 in fantasy PPR, and they get overlooked because of low ADOT, but they're yak monsters. And Devin Duvernay, 125th in ADOT, 13th lowest. 10th in yak after target, 4.3, but he only had 26 targets last year.
I love the players that you throw them the short pass and then they become a running back, basically in a wide receiver. In a wide receiver position, because those are the type of players that could also sneak a few rushing touchdowns at the goal line as well. I mean, it wouldn't shock me at all if we look up in week 3 and we're like, Devin Duvernay is wide receiver 16 on the year. Oh, exactly. My God. Yeah. So I would even classify him where we had Josh Palmer as a waiver wire watch player. I think that you could reasonably take Devin Duvernay with your last pick. I mean, I've been in drafts already, Cody, where I've taken Marquez Valdes-Scantling with my last pick, and it's been like, what am I doing?
So I like that angle you're looking at there with Marquez Valdes-Scantling, but at the same time, for me, that's more of a best ball pick, and the reason being is because everyone around him. Right, you have Adams there. They brought in Rodgers. They brought in Cobb. They got
I get
Tanya, all these other options. And I don't hate Marquez Valdes-Scantling by any means. I don't hate him. But why I would lean towards Duvernay, and what you said, in most leagues you're going to be able to add him after week 1 or week 2. But the way that this whole thing is going, and why I waited to say him till number 1, not because he's my number 1 breakout, not because of that, but because of what I see from him. He just has the it factor. He's going literally you can get him in the last round. You can get him with your last pick on Underdog right now. You're going to be able to get him in the last round or as a free agent ad after an injury happens to your team before the season starts. But Devin Duvernay right now, he's literally competing with James Prochet and Tylan Wallace for opportunities in Baltimore in the receiver position. And everything that's coming out from the Baltimore News is he's dominating. He's making all the big catches. He's the guy. The offense had pre-snap problems early, but it smoothed things out, and Devin Duvernay had a bunch of nice catches. That came from Jonas Schaefer, a Baltimore Ravens reporter. And I don't think people understand the importance of just that opportunity. You literally have Rashad Bateman, Hollywood Brown, Sammy Watkins, Miles Boykin. All of them haven't practiced for the last 10 days. This guy is literally getting number 1 wide receiver opportunities in practice.
And once that genie's out of the bottle, it's hard to put back in if he's performing like he is.
That's so big. That's just so big from an opportunity standpoint. And it's a guy that's basically a free square. You're going to be able to throw him in there.
Yeah. So, so those are your top 5 rookies and sophomores likely to break out. I love all the calls. So, these are players that if you're listening on the podcast feed, you need to write them down. And you need to keep those guys in mind as you get towards the back end of your draft, because all the value has been squeezed out of players like Marcus Callaway already. You're not getting him in the 14th round anymore. He's now at like a 7th and 8th round pick. Whether that's correct evaluation or not, it's just the fact. So forget him. He's over as far as value, and that happens throughout the preseason. So the idea is to get a few of these guys on your teams before they follow that same path or make a splash play in the preseason. Cody, let's switch over to a little bit of strategy talk right now. What do you think the biggest mistake people will make during their drafts, during their redraft leagues, when they're drafting with either their colleagues, a competitive field? What do you think is a common mistake people make?
Going in with a plan. Your plan should be to have the best starting lineup. Your plan should not be to have, so-and-so told me to draft three running backs from the start. So-and-so told me to draft 3 receivers from the start. So-and-so told me not to draft a quarterback here. Let the value fall to you. Know who you like. Know where they're going. Know where they're going in your format. Know where they're going. Know your scoring. That's number one. Know your scoring and know who benefits most in your scoring. If you're in a league that has points per first down, know that. Know who scores. Know who contributes to scoring first downs in those leagues. Know your scoring is like number one. But secondly, I would say don't go in with a plan of like, I'm going to go 0 RB. I'm going to go anchor RB. I'm going to go robust. Don't go in with that plan, because if something falls to you, and we see this a lot, especially these running backs have been falling even further and further. There's no more dead zone this year, it doesn't seem. And I think you can take advantage of that, just letting the drafts fall to you. And that's would be my main thing that I try to look for every year is value. Let the value fall, take advantage of it, try to foresee it, and definitely do mock drafts, I would say.
Fill in the blank. Every time blank gets drafted in the first round, I'm relieved I don't have to take him.
People aren't going to like this. People aren't going to like this one. I'm going to be honest with you. It's Aaron Jones.
You're right. People are not going to like that. But I understand. But God, explain why every time that Aaron Jones gets drafted, you're relieved that you don't have to take him.
Because I like the prospect of him. And this is not being a Vikings fan. This is like literally, I like Aaron Jones a lot as a prospect. We have him he's best comparable to Christian McCaffrey. He's the guy that we think could be the next Christian McCaffrey. But when you look at an opportunity standpoint, he was at about 60% last year, and Jamal Williams was there. And then A.J. Dillon crept in late in the season, and everyone says, well, Rodgers doesn't like playing with rookie running backs. Well, he did at the end of last year. He loved A.J. Dillon. And you saw A.J. Dillon come in, and he's going to keep pushing. But you lose Jamal Williams, but people don't realize that you threw in another dart. And that other dart that you throw into that backfield that has been excelling very well the last couple of weeks is Kylan Hill. And I'm not saying Kylan Hill is going to do anything this year other than be a pain in the ass to Aaron Jones owners. And that's
by the way, in the mock drafts that we did together with Rotounderworld, when I was taking Kylan Hill, I was getting skewered, but I was taking him a little early. This was before the draft, but you agree he's a good player.
Oh, I think he's a phenomenal player, because I think he fits literally in that exact role of Jamal Williams, which is terrible for Aaron Jones owners, and I don't think they want to hear that. But 14.1% college target share, 92nd percentile as a running back. He actually finished off 2020 with 23 receptions
in 2 games.
3 games.
Right? Oh, it was 3 games.
Okay, 3 games. But he had 23 receptions and only 15 rushing attempts.
I mean, if we see a college running back come out of the season with 23 receptions, we're like, okay, they can catch the football. Like, that's a number. For me, that number is around 20, 25 for the season. You're talking about Kylan Hill, the rookie running back that's now on the Packers, had 23 receptions in 3 college games this year.
Yeah, ridiculous. And his metrics don't jump off the board at you, but I'm not telling you he shouldn't have been a 7th round pick either. He should have been more of a 3rd or 4th round pick. This class what it was. But I'm not saying don't go draft Kylan Hill, but what my point is I'm fading this backfield altogether, because having these three guys that are all very capable of everything. Aaron Jones can do everything. Dylan can run, and he's learning to catch even more. Kylan Hill can run, but he's a phenomenal pass catcher. Like, I think they're going to benefit. They're just going to benefit from having great players in the backfield more so than fantasy. I don't think a first-round ADP with Aaron Jones is going to pay off. Last year we loved him. That mid to late second-round pick, I'll take it. But as a top 10 guy, I can't get on board with that because I don't think it pays off having this much talent in the backfield. Plus, you're talking about having Adams and Tanyan, who are red zone monsters. Like, I just can't, honestly.
Yeah, and there's no doubt in my mind that Kylan Hill, 1 week in the middle of the season, is going to be the waiver wire pickup, whether it's just a mild injury by Aaron Jones, or they're in a longer season, they're saying, hey, they proactively tell you Aaron Jones is going to get the NBA star treatment where they rest him. I mean, Green Bay is interested in winning a Super Bowl this year, as they know this is probably the last year they're going to be with Aaron Rodgers in all likelihood. Okay, a couple more questions for you, Cody. So my favorite part of the NFL season is that, guys like you, like us, we study the NFL all year round. I mean, we have these takes, our takes change, they go up, they go down, but week one is all about the reveal. We finally get to see what is actually going to happen. What is the week one reveal that you are most looking forward to seeing? And for me, while you're thinking that through, like, for example, I want to see if Kyle Pitts is any good, because if you can imagine what happens, what's going to happen on Twitter and social media, that if Kyle Pitts catches 7 balls for 80 yards and 2 touchdowns, Twitter might actually self-destruct, or the opposite. If he gets 1 catch for 8 yards. So I'm interested to see what happens. And I know week one doesn't mean anything, but what's the reveal that you're most looking forward to seeing?
Just what you said, though. I want to see what – rookie running back, rookie receiver that we haven't it happens every year where a rookie running back or rookie receiver pops in the first week or two of the season that you didn't see coming. Nobody talked about in the preseason. Nobody talked about. None of the reporters reported anything. That's kind of like, you also can go to this like Jamar Chase thing the last few weeks. And I'm not saying like, oh, this is like taking an easy road out. Like Jamar Chase is going to go for 100 yards, but like, Cincinnati is notoriously quiet. It's a small market. They don't talk about anybody really. And they're not going to be like a New York team where it's like, oh, Elijah Moore. It's be quiet. And then they say a little bit, they're like, oh, Jamar Chase can't catch the football. Okay. Well, really? Like, it wouldn't surprise me if something like you just said with Kyle Pitts, Jamar Chase comes out, he garners 8 targets. He has the rapport. He goes for 100 yards and a touchdown. And people are like, all right, he's exactly who we thought he was.
Yeah. So Jamar Chase is that player that you're most looking for? Because I know you famously, even on your Twitter header, have Jamar Chase as the 101 in rookie drafts, and it started off kind of as a parody of itself. But you really do believe that he should have been the 101, the best rookie for fantasy. Another one of the reveals I'm looking forward to seeing is, I really want to see if Tua is any good. And it was tanked for Tua a couple of years ago. I've talked about this on a few pods already. And last year you can take either side. Either he's not good or it takes time to recover from injury. So if he comes out and just starts slinging it week one, that'll make me excited. All right. Who's a player that you know and that you believe in and you hope gets off to a slow start in your redraft leagues so you can make a low ball offer on them in week 2 or 3? A player a player that's susceptible to a slow start, that no matter what happens in week 1, 2, and 3, you are just not worried about it. Some people might say Saquon Barkley. Like if their fantasy manager gets frustrated in week 2, they're going to make a low ball offer. Who's a player that you are just ready to make a low ball offer on in week 2 or 3 if they get off to a slow start?
I think we're walking into the same situation with Jonathan Taylor. I guess this would have been my answer about 2 weeks ago if we would have known Quentin Nelson was going to be out, Ryan Kelly was going to be out, Carson Wentz. It was been like, I was actually like, if you would answer me this 2 weeks ago, I thought about this and I was like, Jonathan Taylor is going to be another situation where if you don't have him and you didn't buy on the dip last year, you're going to be able to buy on the dip again this year. But I would say right now, I think ETN with that injury yesterday, the last couple of days, I think that's going to open up a window for you mid-season to get him very, very cheap.
Oh, you think you're talking about Travis Etienne? You think that he's going to be coming back this year?
No. I don't think he's coming back this year. He already put him on the IR, so he's out for the year. I'm saying, you said dynasty, right?
No, in redraft, like in the first 2. Yeah, sorry. Okay. I should have stipulated that. Sorry. So if I'm talking about a player that this season maybe gets off to a slow week 1 or 2, and because trades and redraft are almost impossible to make. They're so hard to make because unless you're trading a running back for a wide receiver, and that wide receiver usually has to be better. So who's a player that you think maybe get off to a slow start? Like I said, Saquon Barkley is going in the late first round, early second round. And if he has a dud week 1 and 2, he's a player I'm proactively going to be trying to trade for. Maybe, give somebody like wide receiver like 11 or 14 for him. So is there a player this year that you think that if they get off to a slow week 1 or 2, that it's not even going to push you off them in the slightest?
DeAndre Swift. He's already dealing with a little bit of injury. And truthfully, I mean, this is going to go back to this draft we talked about with Roster Watcher Roto Underworld. I took Jamar Jefferson at the undisclosed pick in the first round of a rookie draft. But Jamar Jefferson literally is in line to be getting opportunities week 1 if this DeAndre Swift injury kind of nags on for the next couple of weeks. And Dan Campbell, we saw him come out and say, we don't know if he's going to be ready. So you're looking at leagues that a lot of redraft leagues have drafted right now, I would say, and a lot are going to be drafted the next couple of weeks. And really, depending where he goes, his current ADP is in that 2-3 turn, middle of the third. People are going to be like pissed because that's a high end guy that you're going to want output from right away. And if they don't get it, they're going to be trying to flip him and getting help because they're going to be frantically looking for wins early in the season. That's a guy that if they don't let him play the first 3 weeks, that tells you that they're taking the necessary steps to make sure he's healthy when he comes back. And when he comes back, he's still going to get those targets. He's still going to dominate the pass catching. And a receiver, a guy I could see coming in, A.J. Brown. If Julio comes out there day 1, they push Derrick Henry week 1, and A.J. Brown's still dealing with a little nagging injuries. He's not quite 100%, and people are spending that second, third round capital on him. That's going to be another guy they're going to try to get out on and try to move off to a more target-based receiver, I'd say. Another guy I'd target. But they're both high-end guys that I think could possibly start out slow, but are definitely going to be strong by the end of the season.
Yeah, I think the Swift call and the A.J. Brown call, both great targets because people get nervous, and you start seeing these crazy trades go down in your redraft leagues after week 1 and 2. I think we all panic when our players don't perform exactly how we want them to, but I think there's definitely, people always talk about like, what's the edge in fantasy football with so much information out there right now? That's the edge right there, taking advantage of early season uncertainty.
They hate burning those early picks, and if injuries are like the number one thing where it's like, oh, I'm dead, I'm done. And then that's when you just take advantage. You have to be always just like with the waiver wire. You just always got to be paying attention and knowing the values of players and when to jump on, when not to. And that's and I know it's not like it's not like a deep pick, like someone that, you can get for free, but not someone that's going to get cut. But this is just like, you have to be paying attention to these things because it fluctuates really quickly on some of these guys.
All right, Cody, you did it, man. We're going to be here on the RotoWire live stream every Wednesday morning. And then if you're listening on the audio podcast, this is the RotoWire preseason Saturday podcast. So this will be posted up in the podcast feed. Definitely go in the feed. Definitely go to the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. Click subscribe. We're going to have 6 podcasts, sorry, at least 5 podcasts a week. And then if you also want to try RotoWire's Fantasy Football Draft Kit for free, go to rotowire.com/try. No credit card. You just go in there and you can get the full draft kit for free for 10 days. Check everything out, the tools, and then you choose if you want to subscribe. Cody, why don't you give them your information? I know that you gained some new fans here today. I saw people in the comments saying, I agree with this. I love the analytics. So give Cody a follow on Twitter. He's at Carpentier NFL, Carpentier NFL. That's follow him on Twitter. And Cody, what else do you want to promote today?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Carpentier NFL. Same on Patreon, patreon.com/Carpentier NFL. You can find almost all of my stuff at playerprofiler.com. The cornerback rankings on playerprofiler.com are mine. And then those are updated every single week. The cornerback wide receiver matchups are updated every week. You can find draft boards from the 2022 NFL draft. And then, of course, Undercovered Ops, my in-season show that breaks down the wide receiver 3s and 4s on teams and who – and kind of like what we talked about here, who's going to break out, guys who are growing in situations. So like a Quez Watkins from last year, now you've seen him break out. He was growing opportunities last year. That's my show. You can find that on Rotounderworld Radio. And, that's where you can find all my stuff. So I appreciate you having me on, Alan. This is always good to chop it up with you.
Yeah, man. You're one of my favorite follows on social media, and I listen to all your stuff too. So again, that's I only have I have the people on this live stream and our podcast that I am fans of, and there's so many great content creators out there, and I just want to share them with the world. So thank you. And if you found value, if you have got some value out of this live stream today, just do us a favor. No obligation, but just click subscribe on the RotoWire YouTube channel. Click like button if you want. It helps us out. And again, if you found value today, that's the best way to repay us. No obligation, but that definitely helps us out. All right, Cody, we'll definitely have you back during the season. You're now a regular. Obviously, you're a fan favorite over here. Everybody will see you soon, and tune in to Jeff Erickson's podcast later today. He has a special guest back on the live stream. Bye-bye.